Hamas has sown terror in Israel over the last 8 days. A barrage of rockets have rained down across Israel, and innocent civilians, including infants, women and the elderly, have been murdered in cold blood. As the world watches in horror at the atrocities committed by Hamas, there has been an outpouring of support, with numerous world leaders expressing solidarity with Israel. Even as Israel is plagued by terror, Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun has backed the Hamas. Panun, who roams free in Canada, has made it a point to endorse the actions of Hamas. This is contrary to the position adopted by the Trudeau administration, which has condemned the terror attacks. Amidst all of this, the Hindu Forum of Canada has urged Canada's Minister of Public Safety to take action against Panun. While Canada has remained silent so far and reluctant to act against Khalistani terrorists operating on its soil, we ask whether Trudeau finds it acceptable to harbour a Hamas sympathizer. Joining us at this point is Ambassador Suresh Goyal, former diplomat. We also have Rashmi Sawant, human rights activist, joining us live. Sumit Peet, political commentator, is live with us as well. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is joining us as well on the broadcast. Professor Nalapat, it's clearly, very, very shocking how now the Hamas is finding support amongst the Khalistanis as well. Gurpatwant Singh Pannun backing them in this fight.
It's not much of a surprise, because what I have been writing about for quite some time, the Sino-Wahhabi lobby or the Sino-Pakistan lobby, they are very active where the Khalistan group is concerned, and that is a problem. The Khalistan group is not only being supported by GHQ Rawalpindi, it's also being supported by GHQ Rawalpindi's I would call them masters, which is the PLA and the Central Military Commission in Beijing. So this is the point, and Panun has been very loyal to the whatever GHQ Rawalpindi wants him to do so far as anti-India activities are concerned, and he is basically following their line, as are others who are supporting the kind of terror groups that he is openly backing. So it's no surprise that that he is supporting Hamas, for the simple reason that this man is against democracies, and particularly is against certain religious groups. He is clearly a Hindu hater, not just an India baiter, but a Hindu hater, and it is now very, very clear from his remarks that he has the similar kind of feeling towards the Jewish community as well. So frankly, given the support that he is getting from certain countries, and given the freedom that these countries have been given both to operate in Trudeau's Canada, it's no surprise that he has come out openly, because that is his stand. He supports extremism, and behind extremism you have the very, very strong economy with a lot of technological capacity, which is now trying to boost extremism wherever in the world it feels it wants to weaken a particular country.
Yes, as they say, a terrorist always supports another, which is why many believe Gurpatwant Singh Pannun has, Ambassador Goyal, pledged his support for Hamas. What do you make of this statement that has been released of his endorsement?
Frankly speaking, I do not know what the compulsions are there for Panun to support Hamas in this manner. Frankly speaking, if you look at the division even amongst people in the world, there are many in Middle East, there are many in many Arabs, and not just Islamic countries, who have also gone in support of Hamas. It is not to justify whether Hamas is right or not. But frankly, the factor is that resort to any kind of terrorist modus operandi is to be condemned. The civilian lives cannot be really hostage by anyone, whether it is a state army or it is a terrorist. Civilians, even in the war conventions, civilians have to be paid attention to. They are not during the execution of war. And therefore, from that point of view, Panun supporting Hamas for the kind of activities that it conducted, and the way it held people hostage, the way it actually went about killing people at the music festival, they are not acceptable at all, frankly speaking. But what actually is worrying is that there he is in Canada, issuing all kinds of threats and all kinds of support to Hamas. And he's in Canada where Trudeau has clearly issued an ultimatum to Hamas that they cannot go on this and these terrorist activities will not be tolerated. Their support to Israel has been articulated in no uncertain manner. They are working with the USA as a part of NATO, and there in the same country, there is this person who issues statements of support to Hamas, and the Canadian government does not do anything about it. And he's not even a government functionary. So clearly the freedom of expression rules has gone to the extent that somebody can say anything, even to hurt the state policy or even to hurt the state interest, and they will stay quiet. If that's the kind of a government that they have, then what kind of expectations can one have on any other issue? Uday.
Yes, but what must be done now? What should we expect Sumit Peer, the Canadian administration to do? We do believe a letter has also been written to a minister in the government of Justin Trudeau urging action against him for his endorsement of Hamas. What would you urge the government to do, and do you have any sort of expectations from them?
Uday, thank you for having me on your show. First of all, you see, terrorist is a terrorist. Hamas are terrorists, Panun is a terrorist, and terrorists are in the business of spreading terror. Now, why is Panun supporting Hamas? Because the massacre Hamas has done in Israel, it's one of its own kind, is the worst massacre in the last 75 years, by the way. Since the inception of Israel and in the Jewish history after the Holocaust. This is the worst what they have faced. Now, Panun supporting Hamas and then threatening Hindus is to, in a way, threaten Hindus in Canada. And elsewhere, I'm going to do a Hamas kind of a massacre. We are fully competent. I want to ask a question here. This Panun is a citizen of Canada and Panun is a citizen of America. Are you waiting for a Hamas kind of massacre to happen by these Khalistanis? When he is openly calling for violence, what is freedom of expression in this? What is the equivalence between a Pannu and a Hamas? Why is he supporting Hamas and then threatening Hindus? Because Hamas threatened Jews and they did what they had to do with Jews. Now this Pannu is threatening Hindus and trying to do the same thing. It is a very, it's a sugar-coated warning what they are sending to us. And I want to ask, what is the Canadian government doing? What is Justin Trudeau doing? You are waiting for a massacre to happen. You want something like Israel to happen. You are waiting for Khalistanis to strike because they are in the good population there. And ISI has a playground in Canada. We all know that. Now, what is the United States of America doing? He is also an American citizen. You are sending your Secretary of State, your General Austin is in Israel, and we fully support America for doing that, what they are doing, 101% support. But when it comes to Jewish interests, when it comes to the interests of Israel, you are doing whatever you are doing, support to that. But when your own citizen is doing this, isn't it terrorism? If Hamas is terrorist, what is Pannu doing? If Ismail Haniyeh is terrorist, what is Pannu? If Hassan Nasrullah is terrorist, what is Pannu? What is the difference between Hassan Nasrullah and Pannu, Ismail Haniyeh and Pannu today? If Israel has a right to take him out, we should also have a right to take him out, because I do not expect any Canadian government to do anything. We get to see what Americans are going to do. Frankly, you can ask me nothing, because without American and Canadian patronage, he cannot roam so freely. Now, tomorrow, if something happens to Pannu and he meets accident, then they will say, oh, there were some people who tried to kill him. Some aliens came, they shot him out up and all. But my problem is, are you waiting for a disaster to happen? Are you letting him to do a disaster? What is the equivalence between him? If Hamas is a terrorist organization, what is Pannu? This double standard. So aren't Hindu lives important? Is it only Jews' lives are important? Oh, Jews are our brothers. I acknowledge it, but Hindu lives are also equivalent. So this person is Uday now crossed all the limits. He is threatening violence. Now, as he is threatening violence to our citizens and our community, and the world has seen the way Israel is retaliating, I think we also have the right for a preventive retaliation. If Americans are upset, let them be. If Canadians are upset, let them be. We should give them a window. Beyond that time, we have ways and means, and if we want, we can retaliate. A preventive, always deterrence is less costly than the war. Deterrence is still much, much better than the war. We don't want massacre to happen. We don't want to retaliate on the life and blood of our brothers and sisters. Before that, this man is capable of doing anything. I think we should have a window. After that, we should communicate to both of them. Look, our patience is running out. Bhai, kuch kar lo iska. If you cannot do it, then jo Mahakal ki ichha, phir to unki ichha to prabal hai na sabse. That will happen as per the will of Mahakal. That is very clear message. We cannot have Indian blood, spilled on Canadian streets or anywhere else. These Khalistanis and this jihadi cannot be allowed to do. There's no difference between a Khalistani and jihadi. There's no difference between Hassan Nasrullah, Ismail Haniya and Panun. For me, they are all same set of people with different names. World does not want terror. India does not want terror. And if the Canadian government is so incompetent, we as Indians have the right to protect our interests anywhere in the world. I think there's a time we have to send this message. You know, you can't send this diplomatically. Through whichever quarters you have to send it loud and clear. It's a window, do it. Else, bhaiya jo phir hame karna will do it. And we have to do it. We cannot afford an Indian bloodshed. This message has to go loud and clear. Indian blood is as important, as sacred as Jewish blood. I have all the anguish, I have all the remorse for my brothers and sisters who lost their life in Israel. But at the same time, I have my brothers and sisters in Canada whose blood, whose lives are equally important. World cannot see Indian Hindus in one paradigm and Jewish and Israeli blood in another paradigm. This hypocrisy has to go, and elements like Pannu are a threat. They are a live ticking bomb. They can explode anytime. Before they explode, let's take them out. That's the simple solution, Uday. There's no other solution, sorry. Uday.
Okay, Rashmi, let me bring you in here on your reading of this endorsement and what perhaps questions should be raised of the Trudeau administration if they do not act against him. If they continue to harbor now a Hamas sympathizer on their land, forget the other charges that he anyways faces as well.
Well, I think that behind every trigger pulled by a terrorist, there are many behind who enable it. There's a reason why all of these organizations are flush with money, and the reason why terror is continuously on the rise, and today we have more terror organizations than ever before. It's because there are enablers, there are sympathizers like Pannu, who under the garb of freedom of expression or freedom of speech, continue to perpetrate and enable such elements. So I think it's very ironic and hypocritical to say that we will weed out terrorism without weeding out the people who enable it, without weeding out the people who actually make sure that these people can go on with their activities. Terrorism does not flourish in isolation or silos. There's an entire machinery, there's an entire mechanism, and what we see in the form of Hamas is just the tip of the iceberg. Like we know, the tip of the iceberg is just the surface, and there's so much behind, and people like Pannu are the machinery. I truly hope that the Canadian government does take steps, because anti-Semitism is institutionally protected. There's measures that come into play when there's anti-Semitism on the rise. The same cannot be said about Hinduphobia. So even if they did let him off the hook for Hinduphobia, I truly hope that they do catch him for his anti-Semitism, for his calls to massacre, for his endorsement of the massacre and inhuman slaughter of Jews that's currently ongoing in Israel by Hamas, which is a terror organization. And at least in that way, a terror enabler like Pannu will be held to account. I think it's the least that we can hope for, because not just as someone who sympathizes with Israel or Jews, the Indian people themselves have a lot to gain, the Hindus themselves have a lot to gain if Pannu is brought to task. And I think it's really high time that he is. And I truly hope that other world powers really go beyond statements of condemnation, because what we've seen these days is symbolic diplomacy. Just to toe a certain line that is convenient globally, people make statements and that's about it, no actions follow. But I truly hope that at least the Indian government can hold the Trudeau government to account for whatever Pannu said in the past, currently, and also that the Israeli government does push on accountability and a proper action, so that really the machinery that enables terror goes away. And once they do, then these terror organizations will themselves go away, because there's no way they can sustain, there's no way they've got the money to acquire weapons of a mass murder and destruction. And I think that's the only way to go about eradication of terror, to go beyond just symbolic diplomacy, symbolic condemnation, and to take active steps and take to task the enablers.
Is it time for the world to join this chorus to speak out against those who provide a safe haven to such individuals? We expect more than just lip service, isn't it now, Ambassador Goel?
The way you said it, I do hope that we will be living in a perfect world sometime in near future. Unfortunately, the world is not perfect. Every country acts in terms of its own national interest and in terms of its own perceived priorities. Look at what happened in Gaza or what happened in Israel. On the day one, as soon as Hamas perpetrated this, no doubt, absolutely heinous act of massacring, killing people at the music festival inside Israel, and they started. There is no doubt about this. What begins is practically annihilation of the Palestinian state in that area, and the USA becomes a very willing part of this process of annihilation on the garb of saying that Hamas being a terrorist organization and therefore any action against Hamas is not to be tolerated, is not to be condemned. Now, on the other hand, Israel says that Hamas and Palestinian are two different entities, but you want to punish Hamas and you want to punish Palestinian. So basically, there is a saying in India, "Na rahega baans, na bajegi bansuri." So clearly the policy seems to be finish the Palestinians and the Palestinian problem will be over. And the world is not doing anything at all, because for the USA, the Palestinian is not a priority. They talked about the two-state solutions, nothing happened to it. And they continue to live in the dire misery in Gaza Strip, and the differences continue. I'm saying this to illustrate that we should not expect the USA to work exactly with the same kind of alacrity in the case of Indian interest. Please be aware that we have to fight our own problem, and therefore either we behave like a superpower without the power of a superpower and think that we can go and do whatever we like and nothing is going to happen to us. The world doesn't act like this. We have to calculate, we have to plan much more cautiously and in a much more sophisticated manner, because we are a different kind of power. We are not the same kind of power as China is or the USA is, or for that matter, even a non-power is. So, in the case of Panun, coming to the specific, I do believe that if Canada doesn't act, let the USA do it. I mean, after all, it is the USA who is in the forefront in this war in the Middle East. And therefore, it is for the USA also to understand that the statement like what is done made by Panun is hurting their interests, is hurting their policies, is hurting their strategies. Therefore, yes, let them do it, let them take it. We, in our case, if we find that Panun does something to our own assets, we must make it very clear to Canadians that they have their assets in India. And those assets can also suffer the same fate. That's the only kind of a language they will understand. Rather than saying that if you do not catch hold of Panun and he does the same thing to us, then we will close our consulate. Why should we close our consulates? Why should we take that kind of an action? The only way is reciprocity. The only way is to let them know that they can suffer the same fate as we do. Unfortunately, we are not doing it. I don't know why. We did that once in the case of the UK, and UK came straight back on track in terms of our security interests. Let us do that in the case of Canada. But the USA continues to protect and support Canada and continues to coordinate and cooperate with them even on the issues which are not of their interest. Uday.
Yes, let me also quickly bring in Professor Madhav Nalapath. Professor Madhav Nalapath, what can the world do at this juncture? It's not a perfect world, it's not an ideal world, says Ambassador Goel, but what steps should and must be proactively taken?
Uday, there is something called public opinion, and what has happened in public opinion, even though there's a coordinated attempt to misuse social media and to infiltrate social media with all kinds of misleading messages, which portray the victim, that is Israel and the Jewish people, as basically the aggressors, and Hamas, the aggressor, as the victim. Despite that, the reality is truth is coming out. Now, for example, we can talk eloquently about Gaza under occupation. It is under occupation. It's under occupation by Hamas, a terror organization. And what has happened to the Israeli youth and to Israeli old people and to Israeli women and children is exactly what happened to those Gazans who did not subscribe to Hamas, who were opposed to Hamas. The same things were done to them. The same things were done to their children, to their women, to their men. And frankly, we have to remember that. So yes, Gaza has been occupied. It has been occupied by Hamas. And until that occupation is removed, there will never be prosperity or peace in Gaza. So that is one point. Second point is, it's very surprising to me that the top leaders of Hamas are living in luxury in a country that is in the Gulf. And are you telling me that they never discussed this particular operation with their operatives in Gaza? They are the top leaders of Hamas. Were the top leaders kept uninformed about this operation? I can't believe that. And if they were kept informed, did not the local government have ways of finding out what the top leaders knew about the operation and basically ensuring that it did not take place? It's very surprising to me that Hamas leaders are living in luxury in certain countries, including in the Middle East and in the Gulf. Now, may I say about Canada? The fact is, Canada is now, frankly, a very welcoming ground for people who have a Hamas kind of mentality. And what they are saying is, when in Canada, there are multiple locations where celebrations broke out on Saturday, October the 7th, when Hamas conducted its brutal terror attack. And in a matter of 48 hours, the same people who are celebrating the brutal murder, rape, and assault, and including what was done to children and to women, they were on the streets demanding that, oh my God, don't do anything. Now don't fight back. It's an aggression to fight back. It is against human rights to fight back. The very same people. Now don't tell me Justin Trudeau's government does not know who all were basically on the streets or in their homes celebrating on October 7th. And then tell me that Justin Trudeau is sincere about fighting Hamas. I don't believe it. There have been more marches and demonstrations and more money collected for Hamas in Canada than there has been in Gaza, or frankly, and that is the situation. So I'd like to say very clearly that, look, I agree, Justin Trudeau's Canada is not going to help India, because Justin Trudeau's Canada, unfortunately, is a state's facilitator of terrorism. I'm not going to use the word state sponsor, but de facto a facilitator of terrorism. And coming to Mr. Panun, he has been a facilitator of terrorism, and the United States has ignored it. Canada has ignored it. Well, now, you are seeing for yourself what happens when you ignore a problem and you pretend it is not there. Some horrible things happen. And one thing I'm very sure, that the IDF in Israel will ensure that whatever action they take will end this particular issue once and for all. And the people who benefit the most will be the Gazan citizens. They will be able to live in the way they're living in the West Bank, without the shadow of a terror organization running their lives, ruining their lives, and killing them, executing them, torturing them every day. If you look at the jails in Gaza, it will be filled up with people who are being tortured. But of course, the world only woke up, not when Gazans were being tortured by Hamas, but when Israelis were being tortured by Hamas. Better late than never. I'm glad the world has woken up.
Okay, let me give Sumit Peer a last word, and then I'll take a break.
Uday, you see, you cannot have double standards in the world. You cannot take one population with one, here and one population here. There is a perpetual threat. The perpetual threat is Panun. He is doing what he's doing. He's exactly doing what Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Quds were doing a few months back. They were trying to, say, we'll do this. But there's a day when they all comes to reality. But now there is a quantum of damage which happens. Now, when there was a problem on Israel, the Americans moved the aircraft carrier. They moved B-52 bombers. They moved everything, F-16s, everything. Good, they moved it. But when it comes to our interests, why is the world acting deaf and dumb? If the world is acting deaf and dumb, then if something happens to those assets, then we have a right to take them out. If Americans have a right in their national interest to take out Qasem Soleimani, when Donald Trump goes and announces that we have taken out Qasem Soleimani, then Canadians have been busy running after a plumber. Then Mr. Canada and Mr. Trudeau, don't start running after this new caricature, because it's a caricature. How does a failed lawyer in United States of America be worth millions? Who is paying for his bills? Where is the money coming from? How is he? Who is paying for his security? Who is paying for his jalsas and julus? Who is giving him the cover? How is he able to alter between America and Canada? You think Americans don't know where he is? Canada don't know where he is? CIA doesn't know where he is? You can have asset, you can use him against India. But, we also have options there. I mean, if you don't go by the book, then nobody will go by the book. There's something might happen to this guy, and you can't start blaming the India. Because our position is very clear. As far as when it comes to the protection of our diaspora, our 1.4 billion peoples, every option is open for India, and let him be anywhere on anybody's citizen. If you're a Canadian, American, whichever citizen are, you do not matter when I look at a quantum number of 1.4 billion. We have more than 6 million diaspora out of India. If anybody becomes a visible threat to them, there is no freedom of expression, there is nothing, and Indian state holds all the right to protect its citizens. So this message has to go loud and clear, Uday. We have to do what we have to do. We have seen how Americans have responded to Israel. We support that. But when it comes to our interests, the world cannot be deaf and dumb. And when we do something, or if something happens by the grace of God, then you cannot start blaming the India for what has happened. We have a right to protect ourselves. Israelis have a right to protect itself. Jews have a right to protect itself. Hindus also have a right to protect itself. Black lives matter, brown lives matter, Jewish lives matter, Hindu lives also matter. Hindu lives also matter, sir. This message has to go loud and clear, and anybody who becomes a visible threat has to be eliminated.
Okay. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.